So let's sit on our bolster, and we're going to work your hips into this version of sitting in Baddha Konasana. So what I have is my feet together, knees out, and the circulation kind of dials into the adductors. So this will be just kind of a pause at the beginning, a moment of get a feel of your knees when they move outwards, and have the knees so that they slide with the feet forwards and that you have a diamond-ish shape, okay? Now with the rib cage creating this arch through your spine so you have that concave back, I want you to let your body move into a forward bend. This is a forward fold, right, from an upward pattern, right? So you're basically, in some sense, moving in that downward motion to your legs. So I want the focus to be that filling of circulation through the thighs. And then you'll come back up to center and bring the knees to point up and actually work our way into this kind of interesting sequencing. So lower on back, have your seat so it's centered on the bolster. And when you're lowering back, the knees are drawing in towards the center. And I want you to have your blanket so it's tucked in right at the hip crease. Going to feel a little bit interesting to support you so you don't overly have flexion right into the back muscles. So feel where your knees bend. And the idea is that the legs actually drop and they're going towards your upper body. You're not trying to bring your feet overhead, but you have this blanket stuffed in at the crease of the hips, the front of the hips. So even if you're on your back and let's say you have like a sandbag here, it's the same idea when you move your legs up and back downwards towards you. And then you let your arms flow open or into cactus. And you spend the moments on letting that circulation in the core body really start to boost. So it changes the hemodynamics right in your stomach as far as the blood flow and the circulation into those spaces. So get that feel of that fulcrum point of balance and settle into that little bit of pressure that helps with prolapse, right? So we're affecting the blood flow into the core body. And if the legs tend to motion a little farther back, see if you can really use that blanket and kind of stuff that in and feel where the legs touch to the blanket. Okay, and keeping the emphasis here that it's an upward facing, right? So we have the spine gently starting to stretch and the feet are separated and the legs may find a formula all their own of reality, which might be to feel the feet flex or relax or point, but let the legs drain out. Yeah, just enter your practice, trying to find a measuring few moments of breathing slowly and gathering your attention on the even rhythm of your breath coming into this morning's practice. So I'll say a few words about the sequencing today that I'm working through, that influencing the circulation to really rest the organs from gravity's downward pull. So trusting the directions and going very slow in a manner that your body can coordinate and feel how it cooperates upside down. It's like a different perception of the the body's movement capacity, right? Or its coordinating abilities when you're upside down. We'll take just a few more moments here and start the process of bending your knees. So you might like that blanket there. What I'll ask you to shift into is to take a ball or a block between the knees. Either is fine. And when the knees are bending and the feet move down a little bit, they're off of the floor, we're going to move the blanket aside. And with the arms stretching straight open from the chest, you're going to let the knees flow from right to left. And as the knees go side to side, squeeze into the object between the knees. Okay, try to keep that squeezing perspective to influence the sides of the back of the waist. So we're trying to work with our sequencing to be gentle with the kind of the construction of our back, our lower back musculature into the base of the spine. I guess you could say the base of the spine, huh? But where you feel the knees rocking side to side, can you experience moving the knees when they go to the side and they kind of squeeze up towards your arm, and then you tilt to the other side, so there starts to become this scooping action. And feel when you go through this that you want to find the pattern that's supportive for you. So this might not work for you to scoop side to side. It might be best to just let the knees tilt side to side, kind of windshield wiper like. So just as we come back into the center now, feel where you have that ball and keep it simple. You're going to squeeze into the ball, but also bring your knees towards the chest. And then remove the ball. It's a whole inverted experience here. Take a sandbag and place it across the belly rib region so you can equalize both sides of it. Okay. And then as you start to press that sandbag so it's widening, we're going to use that widening sand on our feet. So from the knees having been in this perspective of lifting up your legs and draining them, knees are really great for this purpose. I mean, having that middle space that you can hinge at to prepare to invert. And then as you bring your knees to your chest, you'll scoop up, place the sand on the soles of your feet. Yep. And then as you start to work with that lift up, see if you can manage where you are on the bolster that really works for you. I've shifted back a bit more than I'd like. So I'm going to move my tailbone closer to the edge of my bolster, which I could lift up my hips and scoot the bolster under me versus trying to scoot forward on it when I'm already upside down. And then position yourself so that you have the best opportunity to feel that, or actually to experience as much inversion or feel how gravity flows through your legs. Okay, at this point, it's a lot of leg work, right, to get the reverse flow in the body. That's kind of the nice thing about having them, right? You're able to reverse that gravitational pull in the vital organs. And then feel how the platform of the bolster is centering your pelvis, your waist, your ribs. Flex your feet. Relax your arms. They might be a little downwards or out. And then each of these shapes, really, it's meant to be a restorative pattern. So we come into the shape and we stay for a bit. So the body can reap the benefits and actually have that provided time in the prescribed shape that we're working with to regenerate and heal. And right now that healing is about the organs the repair, the reversal of that gravitational flow of the blood flow back down to the vital organs, but also to opening the chest and the lungs and the heart. Okay, so let the feet stay in a relative calm, kind of braced position. And draining the legs. And if movement is what you crave, you might let the movement be with your arms moving maybe out to the sides or cactus pose. And rest the eyes back into the brain. And receive your breath. Empty the lungs. Now noticing what's kind of carving into your back, right? At this point in the session, your back has a dent in it, right? You've lifted up your hips on support. So now that this natural arch has been identified in a dent place on your back, so it's reality at this point, we're going to use that lift for traction in the whole spinal column and really let the leg and the spine from the leg be the receiving end. So those that want to stay with legs up, Viparita Karani, this pose, you can remain in it. A good 5 to 15 minutes a day is good for this pose, especially if you lay the legs like on top of a chair or couch or up against a wall. You can remain longer usually. But for our purposes, we're adding some layers because it's a little more active practice. So as you bend through the knees, feel as you bend, for those that are continuing along, notice the similarity to our first pose with the crease at the hips, but there's no blanket there, right? So you can feel that adds some pressure to the abdominal organs. Okay, so if it's a little stagnant in that area, this is helpful. Now let go of the sand idea here. So you can either let it drop overhead or slide it off with your hands, and then find a belt and we'll place it buckled up in a wide loop beneath your right foot. And as you lift up the right leg, take a sandbag on top of the left thigh, lengthen it down, and then get a hold of your belt. And as I grasp it, I have a fairly long loop here. So I'm going to place that loop to the center, and you want to find the belt so it's at your occiput, and you'll feel where there's that bump at the back of your head. And that's the support kind of hook for your belt to touch onto and compress around. And it's a compressive pose for the head, right? So if you notice in traditional restoratives, there's many, there's uses of eye pillows and so forth. And so this kind of puts pressure at the back of the head, so it has that compressive value in an area we don't get a lot of that towards, right? So it supports. Now, right now for me, my back feels a little bit achy with it. So I'm gonna push my elbows into the bolster and slide myself a tiny bit back. So you have to find what works for your body. And if the achiness is coming from the quadricep being a little bit stiff, the sandbag might not be a good idea for you. So if that's not the working leg position, you can bend your left knee, place the foot down, and then go from there into brain float. Okay, so kind of sense, how is your back? We've done quite a few poses that continue to influence the natural arch, and that might be a bit much. So sand or no sand, feel where your arms are out to the sides and feel where the weight of your head is centered into the belt, okay? And if the foot is pushing into the belt and it feels quite tight on the calf, you might migrate towards a bent right leg. Yeah, and those that aren't interested in having the belt behind your head, you can alternate that by sliding the belt away and let your head rest on your blanket, and then have the belt in your hand. So between my thumb and my index finger, that webbing is my belt. And I'm stretching my arms overhead. And then when I lengthen my left leg down, it feels a little more comfortable. So, you know, at any given day, it could be a different reception in your body for myriads of reasons, not understood by the intellect, but it just feels like it's better to change it. So feel where there's change occurring and address that, either with sand or with none. Breathing slow, consciously breathing in low belly. You know, let's change the leg that's up. So what you need to do is maybe take your sand off, switch the left foot up into the belt. And sure, I have an easier route of doing that when I don't have my belt behind my head, for me right this moment, but you might find it quite simple to switch the foot into the belt and lengthen the opposing leg. And maybe it feels different on the second side as far as the sand on the top of the right thigh now. So offer yourself the equal opportunity to start on the second side. And then if things change internally to cooperate with the props, then you change with that. So if there's any discomfort, then it's not good alignment for you. So I encourage you to let your eyes relax so that you have a little less resistance in the muscles of the face. Let the back lines of energy through the shoulders into the neck soften, and feel the emerging quality of the movement of the belly, the centering of the hips, optimize circulation into the lungs, and exhaling, empty out the lungs. Now, as you start to transfer the pressure into that left leg, that circulation boost, we're going to let both feet be in the belt. So however you've worked this, you might take your belt first off the back of your head and then carefully let the head relax on the blanket, maybe nod it a tiny bit side to side. Remove the sand. And then as I move the feet both up into the belt, I'm going to push the feet out. So select a moment here where you're able to stretch open the feet, but maybe it's not necessarily a big leg stretch, right? It might feel significant to some, maybe a little bit shaky, but there's no requirement to get the belt as wide in a loop as possible, right? As far as achievement, it's about the inversion that reverse that gravitational flow through the lymph in the legs, the lymph in the groins. And since that's a pretty boggy region, right, as far as groins, then we let the arms flow open, so the armpits relax. And you experience about 45 seconds in this one. Feel where the feet are not trying to flex or point, they're just there. And receiving. Keep in mind, many of these shapes are about getting into the position to affect the circulation and to create an environment for repair and recovery. So they're very still frames for the breath to kind of conceive of restoring and lengthening the exhale. Now, as you bend your knees, you're going to reach up to the belt and get a hold. And as you start to slide your feet together, we're going to soften through the legs and then take the belt off the feet. And as you put the belt aside for the moment, we're going to scoop the knees into the chest. And as I push the bolster forwards, still having that bolster near your rear, you're going to push it forward enough so the fingers can just touch onto it and lower the feet down. Okay, so with your feet onto the bolster, feel the awareness of pushing down into them and how your seat kind of moves a little bit back, right? So you feel almost this natural arch. It's a little bit of a rocking for the back of the pelvi, right? You can feel that manner of fairly dense back bending. And then add a ball between the knees, add a block if that's what you've got. And as I lift up the hips, I'm not focusing on squeezing in deeper to the ball, just enough to hold it. And then as I lift up my hips, my feet under knees, but if you do feel that is jagged on the knees, like too much motion, too much reach forward over the ankle, then what you'll do is push the bolster farther forwards, and it's a little easier setting. So when you're in bridge pose here, I want you to place your block so it's on its mid height, which might mean you have to kind of push up a little bit further. The block is under the back of the pelvis, so it's right where you feel that intersection of the legs into the back of the hip spatially. And then when you center on that, it's relaxing to the buttock muscles, right? You don't have to clench that space. So why not feel the bridge pose for its circulation benefit and not require yourself to clench so much to get your hips in this position for resetting, right? The circulation in the pelvic floor. So we work the pelvic floor for toning in the practice, but this is the prep for it right now. So I want you to let your arms rest down so they're towards the bolster, palms are open. If the flesh of your arms feels like it's kind of flowing out a little bit, try to roll the shoulders one at a time down and in towards the spine. Keep it simple. And then squeeze the ball or block and relax the squeeze. Unless you're going to lose the ball or block, let it just stay there unless it feels like it's going to drop. And then squeeze it again. Okay, now feel the detail of pushing inwards with the knees to the point where the back is kind of opening. This is a nice shape to be where you're not clenching the rear muscles, right? The inner thigh muscles, yes, they're working, right? It's coming down from our legs up version. So we're trying to come down in a gradual kind of acclimate the lymph and all the spaces that we're draining to the practice. Okay, think of it as a science experiment today. Okay, so when you squeeze the ball, can you find a minor way of pushing into it? So it's kind of this chronic ongoing squeeze that you can create with your legs. Right? It's not on a sudden basis, you continue it as long as there's the ball. And then you're going to push down to your feet. Simultaneously, you're squeezing the ball. Squeeze and push, squeeze and push. And then, oh, all of a sudden you're not so dependent on the block, and slide it away. It might still be pretty much attached and you have a dent from it, but slide the block away and then lower your spine. Yeah, and if you go a little slower with the spine, lowering down. Okay, and feel every little particle in the back that touches. And before you completely hit bottom, bring your arms to the ceiling and stretch them back overhead and lift your hips into bridge pose. If the blanket's interrupting your passage of movement, move it away from under your head. It's an option. So lift and lower and find a very peaceful drawbridge sequencing of lifting and lowering the pelvis that is balancing to you with that foot pressure down and just the right delicate squeeze of the ball. So you're able to ride the spine, massaging between the vertebral column. And let's keep it going for a few more moments. Some of us will go faster, some will have a slow pace. So if you're going slow, you might feel a little bit more impression between the vertebrae and kind of this ultra sensitive massage through the back. It's very kindful versus abrupt. It's the only person that will do this for you, right? Yourself, is finding a way to organize your movements. So much for organizing your day or your thoughts, but organize these movements in a kind of cautious way. Taking it one more. Now with the spine centering down, we're going to move into reclining cobbler's pose. So the feet together, the knees out. So as you bring your knees to your chest, remove the ball or block and bring the knees out wide. My bolster feels a little too snug towards me, so I'm going to push it away. So when my feet are on my bolster, I'm going to use a couple blocks, one under each leg. And you know what's kind of interesting about this for your not just your back muscles, but actually for me, it's my knees. And you might have some things with knees like the inside, the outer layer, whatever you're going to point to as far as the muscle or the bone that it's affecting, the external rotation has an effect, and you want this to be effective, right? So having the blocks up pretty high and tilting them in, so you really kind of push them into the sides of the flesh of the legs and support that so my knee doesn't have any pressure now as much. Of course, if my bolster is farther forward, it does make it easier. So my feet really scoop together and touch the soles. Add a sandbag across your upper ribs. Okay. Center the circulation in your hips. If it's kind of mild for you in your hip, that's okay. Right? Sometimes the regenerative awareness comes from, something just under the layer of intensity where your body can comfortably receive. And then as you kind of have that sand pack down, let the arms relax and then feel the filling up of the rib cage and the exhalation. If the inhale is easier for you to sustain a longer duration and you can keep that pace even in an out breath, I'm trying to encourage you to let your out breath lengthen. You know, and if your lungs are a little bit stiff, which is true, some of us have, you know, it's different weeks, right? We practice more, some weeks we don't. So it will affect your breathing, your lung capacity. When you do this work with the sandbag weight training is a good practice. And if you're interested in some of the paperwork on what that program can be, it's a simple handout about sandbag weight training for the lungs. But our basic focus is that we're inhaling for 4 and we feel the resistance with the sand and we let the body try to lift up against it. And then when we exhale, it's a diaphragmatic strengthening program here. Your emphasis is to lengthen the exhale 1 to 2 counts longer than the in-breath. You know, try to keep that awareness going when we move into our twist. Okay, so that's going to twist clearly organs, muscle, heart, lungs. Okay, so with the next few moments, you'll feel the inner thigh gradually relax. And now when we keep the awareness of the rib cage with that momentum of breathing, when you pause and slow down for this practice, sometimes your mind will kind of flip into, there must be something more to do. So this is a good time to notice when we can start adding the breath work into another phase of the practice and try to stay in the processing, absorbing of the practice versus kind of maybe reprogramming into some other approach. So consider this as your hips stay in that kind of traveled open pattern. We're going to bring the knees to point up. We'll take a counter twist here. So let's move our left leg and cross it over the right leg, and then knees are going to go left. I'm going to get my block in. The ball would be nice too. I just tuck it in outside my left outer band of my leg. We've done something similar to this in the beginning of practices, but this one's a little more grouped up. So the legs are certainly around each other, more of a grasp with one leg, lifting and squeezing down to the other. You know, feel how things slant. Feel the ribs, feel the organs, feel the hip. Now come back center, uncross, and then cross your right leg and be sensitive to how things feel around the knees. Those are the issue areas for this path, this part of the sequence, is to notice what's going to be the most healthful for your knee. Let your knees go to the right. Remember, you have basically your right leg crossed over your left, and your foot is on the bolster, and your knees are shifting to the right. And the sand could stay across your ribs. Feel where there's the juncture in the hips. We're going to smooth that out in our back and then across into the waistband, into the hip here. Knees come up, uncross, and then use your feet to push the bolster to the right side of your mat. And then as it's over there, you might put your blanket on top of your bolster. We're going to do a leg crossover, left leg over to the bolster. So here's where you might tuck your ball, right, to the sacrum. And when I do decide when I'm going to add my sand, let's say I look down to the knee and it's not on the bolster, it's kind of tilted up. So your best option there will be to add your blanket on top. It doesn't have to be under that whole leg, but you want to get a feel that this is kind of easy peasy to get your leg onto. And the ball helps, right? That is an anchor, but also it kind of pushes the leg across, doesn't it? Kind of inspires it. It doesn't push it, but it inspires directional balance. And then we move our sand. Either you place it on your leg or you place it on your ribs. I've seen some that like to have the sand so it's up on their chest, and if that's comfortable for you, it's okay. If it's not a good offering for you, then don't do it. And if you feel, oh, well, my arm, and maybe you also have a bag of rice that you brought to class today, or a sack of potatoes, you could put that on your arm. Breathing in potato fumes. So when I have that across, I like the sand on the leg. I do see the benefit to the arm for my breathing muscles. You know, especially if you don't use it, you kind of notice how your breath was with the sand, and then you take it away, just as a tester. And the sand makes my breathing a little more challenged, and I have to work a little deeper to strengthen. So you might like that. Okay, but where you are is here with your shape. Let your head turn to the left. And really craft the moment here for your internal practice. You know, the body has definitely cools by this point in the practice. It cools down. So if you're starting to notice that you're getting to coolness, your feet, anything, then add some layers to you. Even if you have an extra blanket around, you can put it over you too. So the body can really get into that repair mode where it's supported, it's protected. And as the spine is centered, the important part of seated twists is that you anchor at your sitting bone, but a reclining twist like this one, you're anchoring from the spinal column. So most suggested practice, right, to deepen your the stretch in your hips is to do some reclining twists first. I don't always do that in my teaching, but it's a nice balance for you start with a nice balanced spine. It starts neutral. Most of us can lay flat on our backs, basically maybe something under our head to support the neck. We can find our symmetry first and then cross over. Okay, now as we start to shift this pose, I want you to explore that left arm. If it's a little bit back, great. If it's straight open to the left, okay. It's great or okay. And try to move the arm back for a moment, the left arm, so it reaches. So your ribs have that natural curvature, right? We got natural spine curvature, we got natural rib curvature. So everything's kind of hydrated, okay? So when we switch the sides, I want you to take this next pattern between to move the ball away. And then you're gonna bring your knees in. Now remember in the beginning we had that, that reverse forward bend. So sand is on my belly now. I'm gonna lift my legs up and can't get the legs nearly back as far as if I have my bolster under me. So just notice the difference as what bolster can do. I think that's my message here, is that boosting up your pelvis is pretty helpful for traction, okay? So we're gonna lower the feet down, and what works for you basically is to move your bolster to the left side, maybe by your pure strength or your kicking ability to push your props to the left. Okay, left leg straight-ish. right leg cross over-ish to the bolster and place that sand. I like the blanket on top. I think that's been a nice comforting addition. Just noticing that you might use this time to focus on repairing, right? Healing, regenerating. So not making it hard on yourself. So if your leg can push down to the bolster, but you have to really work that and stress out your joints, then use a little bit of height, unless it naturally folds into it. So as I move my right arm open, I can stretch it back besides my head. I can move it spreading open the chest, turning your head to the right, letting your eyes center back. If you have a sandbag on your arm or you have an extra sack of potatoes, you can put that to your right arm. Additional yoga prop. Yeah, and if the waist and the kind of the frontal hip bones feel this kind of unusual perspective right now, you know, if you get quiet and close your eyes and scan the body, you'll feel that this whole hip section is really twervy, right? If you kind of notice from the standpoint of the pelvis, it couldn't be more bizarre for that experience in that zone. So let that circulation really flow through the hip, through the lower back, through the pelvis, which to me is kind of in the hip chamber for this one. And then the ribs and arms. Let them be wherever they want to flow. Feel the in-breath. Empty on the out-breath. Okay, so where the arms are open, maybe in the final few moments, we stretch the right arm back besides the head. So you have that reach for the ribs. And perhaps you decide to move the arm straight open to the side. Okay, so you feel where that range is fairly significant. So we're not in a symmetrical shape right now. We're about ready to get more symmetrical. But feel where the balancing act is for your back muscles. Like from the mid-spine up, there is some symmetry occurring. Now we're going to do some core strengthening and some balancing for the upper bones. So what I want you to work towards is to let that right arm lower down to move the ball away. Okay. We're going to go gradual. And the important part of this is if you can kind of hear me, and I know sometimes you're dependent on the visual, feel the sequencing habit here is to kind of piece it together, but let's try to flow the bone zones, you know, merge up into our upright position. So I'm going to take the sand aside. All sand is off. All potatoes are off. Okay. And then as I move my bolster a little forward, I'm going to roll my body weight to the left because that's my direction of rotation. If you're to the right, you go right. But I'm going where my leg was crossing over. I'm going to go to that left side and then push. And then when I come up, I'm going to slide in my blanket from behind me, take a little seat on it, and then get my bolster in front and place that bam right in the center and forward. Okay. This blanket on top is not useful, so I'm going to take the moment since I'm sitting and fold it up so it's in a quarter fold, toss it off to the side, and then turn myself onto hands, knees, kneeling on the blanket, bolster right in the front of the blanket, vertical, okay? And then as you place your body to the bolster, like I mentioned, we're doing some core strength. What you're gonna work your way towards is to lie on it. That's easy enough. But when you're lying prone on the bolster, we're gonna bring the arms so they actually reach down into the palms. So what I'm feeling is my knees aren't super supported, so I'm gonna scoot the blankie back there. Okay, so I want my knees to feel like they're up on the blanket, they're not on the floor, and they're resting. And then start to work your way towards tummy time. Okay, so feel where your hands are on the floor and the pelvis, the front of the pelvis is pressing into the bolster, true, but get a feel here where the legs are separated. In fact, let them really kind of widen as long as the knees are on the blanket. So your back will not feel as clenchy. And then start to come into Sphinx pose. So, oh, that's so easy. I get my elbows right next to my bolster, kind of tucked on the sides, fingers open, spread the palms. And then as you open between the thumb and the pinky, you're going to gently move your head center as if the crown of your head is aiming forward from your pose. Okay, now collect your focus on the elbows up into your shoulders. So you have a kind of a pressure point down into your elbows. Okay, strengthening. And then as you lower your head down even more, relax your back and slide your hands beside your top edge of your bolster so your elbows are bending by your sides. Good. And again, this is all generous, slow movement. So my back, you know, having it to be comfortable right now is not the truth, right? It's a little bit active. It's waiting for directions. It's a good way to say it. And then as you start to lift up, feel where your legs are part of the puzzle. So the width of the legs helps. But if I bring my knees a little closer in, I can kind of collect my my consciousness into my back. So my back, it almost feels like my legs, that separation at the back of the pelvis, and then it crosses through the fibers in the middle of the back, and then it wings down through the back of the shoulder blades to the hands, and then start to push up. Now, if your back is getting tight, I know too many words in the experience, the hands can go forwards, and then you lift up. So for me, my hands farther forward works in my balancing pose for my back muscles, right? It's certainly close to an up dog, but it's a balancing locust pose, we'll call it that. It's a merging of postures. Okay, strengthen the back. Now when you lower down completely, you're gonna slide the hands back, toes under, lift up dog, stretch the waist forward through the chin, and then use your hands, your arms so actively to bend your elbows and help you come up. You're gonna have to merge your knees under your hips and then round your back into a cat pose. Inhale, arch. Exhale, round your back. Alternate cat-cow. Okay, now feel the wave in the spine. It's so much more descriptive than when you're on your back, right? You can truly work on that rounding, pushing the floor away, and then arching. Let's take one more rounded flex spine and really feel how your back lifts, and then lift it more. Toes under, lift the knees, lift the back more. Now you're on a slant, right? So now that you're in a little more of a piped up position, alternate bending your knees so you can stretch down through the bottoms of the feet. Feel that alternating pulse, downward walking dogs. Okay, walk your dogs. And then if your feet want to go wider, go for it. If they feel best right where they're planted, stay. And as you balance the energy into your feet, we're going to all bring our hands to walk them back towards the feet. And then scoot your feet up to the blanket. Now, if you want to get your calves to stretch a bit more, slide the toes up on top of the blanket. You might need your bolster under your hands to get there. And then stretch your heels down right off of the edge of the blanket so that you're stretching your lower leg, okay? Not required, not required. If you would rather have your feet flat next to the blanket, perfect. But merge the upper to the lower. Let the weight of your head stretch your spine. And either your hands are on your bolster, or they're holding your elbows, or they're striving to keep you in the pose, whether they handle the blankets or the bolster or each other. And then feel that inner vision of recirculating, right? Reversing the effects of gravity to the brain. So the head is below the heart. It's a really interesting shape internally. And certainly I feel it in the skin cells of my face as much as the body. I suppose that's part of the body, but you know, you can feel that flush in your head as well, your sinuses. You know, if you're on top of the blanket, scoot your toes back off so that you can have a realistic version of this inversion with the bottoms of the feet feeling the flooring. And then feel from a squat. I want you to be a little cautious on the knee pressure. So I have the knees bending. I'm not trying to put my seat behind my knees right now, but I do feel the knees bending to stretch my back a little deeper. And then we'll start to swoop back forward. We're going to come into a side sage with the right knee next to the bolster. So I want you to do is scoot your feet back, lower down the knees, and then we're going to do the side sage with a blanket under our hips. So turn your bolster across your mat, okay? And then take it so that the blanket is right up to the edge of that bolster, okay? So the blanket's tucked right there. And then I'm going to use a block and a blanket on the other side. So I'm facing to my bolster. Then I add my blanket on top of my block. Okay. I got my sand nearby. And I'm going to sit on my right hip. Okay. Grab a ball or a block for the inside of the left leg. And then add on a sandbag to the external left leg. If you've decided that it's not appropriate for your hip, you might add your other block overhead too. You can go sand free. Okay, so here we are. We got our center. We have the length of the left side in full focus, and the right hip is just getting anchored down. Okay, it's already balancing into the density into the hip, that is. But you know, if you do feel this left thigh is angling back and too much arch in the spine, then simply carry it so it's directly below your pelvis forward. And it's okay to make that easier transition that way. Yes, doesn't need to be aggressive, especially now that you have a blanket under your hip. It's a little different texture for your waist to stretch. Block overhead might be useful for the lengthening on your left side. And the block could be under the hand. You might decide to move off the block or move your left arm open. Counterspin the heart. But just feeling how this affects the circulation and how the energy moves through the core of the body. Get that center. Let your eyes relax. Now with the costal rhythm, the breathing moving through the ribs, that seems obvious, but how much air you get into the lungs is dependent on the movement of the ribs. Now, when we start to turn, we're going to keep this all about the ribs, the costal breathing. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to actually start to bring it into a rotation on a supine position. So on your back, you're going to take the sand off that left side. And then we've got the props pretty well designed here, besides this block overhead, which you might end up using right now for your sacrum. So I'm going to encourage you to take that block down next to your hips. And then carefully, you're going to bring your sand is off right now. You're going to roll onto your back. You might have to kind of lift up for a mini moment there. But you're going to move any props that are kind of in your way. You've got your blanket under your rear, so that's nice. My head is on my block and blanket overhead. And then stretch your arms open. Keep it simple. My knees are bending. If you decide you want to block under your pelvis, you can add that. That might be a bit much. This natural curve in your spine that you're kind of riveting off of from the last position, the side stretch, is what I'm working with right now, is this costal rhythm. Okay, so feel the feet touch down, really make that imprint. If you can step your feet out a little wider and then let the knees rest together would be best. Toes turn in. So you're in teepee pose. And so the feet are out, the toes are in, the knees are together. And feel the back muscles. I know the whole pelvic area, to identify how to direct the muscles can be a little tricky as far as naming things. So we're going kind of generic, knees together, feet apart, toes in, that type of languaging. But notice where the special pattern of movement of the ribs is felt here. The breath is deep and full. Keep going with that. Turn to your left. So we're going to rotate to the left. And we're taking side sage with the left hip down. I know this is a different way of coming into your sage poses, but maybe it'll be a theme for the week. Okay, so find out just the variety of possibilities, right, with these shapes, using the props to be our influence for creating a support in the shape. So when I have my block overhead, I like to let the arm actually move open. That's my pose of choice, right? That's my movement of choice with the pose. But you might prefer the block under your hand. Anytime you can get that rib span that's out of its tucked in chamber life would be useful for your breathing muscles. So feeling that generous dose of movement and balance, internalizing. Yeah, the sand feels really good on your hip zone because that kind of break off point between your waist and your hip, it's where there's some circulation in that area that feels good to get touched and stretched and elongated, that side connective tissue, right? That lower bracket of the waistband into the hip land, right? The lateral rotators that we start to feel here, the piriformis. So as we approach coming up in this pose, use that sand, and maybe it just ends up on the leg and not on your waist sometimes. So with a few more moments here, stay steady the shape, let your head relax on the blanket, and breathe deeply. Feature the movement of the lungs. You know, where the position of the arm is where we're going to orient our body is back overhead in that zone. So that's where we're going to be turning our focus towards. This is the visceral orientation session, coming from being a little backwards here. So it's obvious the left knee is bending, right? That's a choice we're all utilizing in this side stretch. So I encourage you to feel where that feature reaches through your waist. And if you don't want to roll into a seated position yet, that's okay. Let's say you're here and you want to use the ball and kind of massage into the lateral rotators. You're welcome to do that, of course. So I'll give a couple ideas before we sit. So if you're moving your sand off, you're going to take that off. And if you decide, well, I like to be working my side rotator, what you might do is kind of roll up. You can grab the ball. You can put it to your right glute and massage into that glute and then over into the left glute just for even a little bit of time to the side. The blanket underneath at you is not going to make it as deep, right? Because that's going to transfer a little more cushion into the actual connective tissue. So you might slide that off, but I'll break it into the next pose. So if you're going to massage with the ball, go with that for yourself massage. And then when you're ready, join us to come up to sitting. Okay, so we're going to use the bolster in front. Now we're sitting on the blanket that we just had our hips on our back. Okay, so when you find your way back up, you're going to bend your left knee and place a ball under the left knee. And I'm assuming you have one of those, or you'll use a towel, something that's a little more cushiony than a block. And then let's move our bolster in front of us. And with that support under our foot, I'm sitting on one blanket. Now, if you want two blankets to support the body's ability to move forward or around, then take the second blanket on top. Okay, so that would be helpful for some people, I bet. So sitting now, I can kind of feel when my foot goes up on the bolster, the knee is pointed out. It's a little bit of a challenge for my hip. So as I take the blocks, I do a little bit of a check. If this is too much pressure in the inner thigh, then I know having a blanket addition is going to be primo for me. So I'm going to add another one. Right, more blankets. Better. Okay. So you can add the ball, you can add a sandbag. Now we're going to place it on the left leg for this one. And then lean forwards and feel where that right foot is flexing. Feel where your spine is never ending in its arches, its natural curve. And then moving from a back musculature that's strengthening here versus really rounding and scooping. So feel where that back is in that extended shape. Bring your right hand to the back. Okay, and then when you start to come up, you're going to lift up the left hand off the block, place that hand to the right knee, and then simply turn the waist as if that left hand's going to reach around the waist, round to the left hip. And maybe you grab the sandbag handle if you have a handle on your bag. and then twist the body. So you stay very confined to your core when you twist here. Right hand is back, left hand is below the right knee. Breathe through. Breathe through everything. You know, as you come back to forward, you're going to take pigeon. So you'll move your sand away on the left leg. You'll move the ball away. You got, I hope, 2 blankets under your seat. And then stretch that right leg straight back. And as you lengthen your right thigh back on the blanket, you can pull in your bolster. And you might position it so it's under your belly. Right? And this might feel pretty intense of a stretch into your left leg. So if it's a little amped up than you want, remember you can also turn your bolster horizontally right across and prop your elbows on top so you're not kind of leaning as far into that denser hip stretch. I kind of like this balance with my elbows on top. But I can feel when I have my bolster in front and my body is on the bolster, my core. That's kind of a nice stretch, deepening into the leg, as long as the knee is safe with that. So give it a few moments, let your head turn. So remember, you're going to turn towards your left leg. Okay, and if you got specs on, you might take them off, depending on what you're feeling like, and let your head relax. That might be the only truly defined relaxed spot. This could be your head. And that back leg lengthens. You now trust the hinge at the knee. Trust where the hinges are in the knee and the hip. And then slide the hands back. When we come up, we're going to switch through the leg. So when you lean your weight over to your left hip, you're going to push the bolster, tap forward, and then bring the right leg center and the left leg out. Slide the right foot close to the left leg and placing the ball below the right leg and the sand on top. The back of the left leg might be very happy that you're in this shape, just to kind of cool off the knee. So what you might do, prep before you put your foot on your bolster, is to tilt it up and lean forward. This is more for the spine, because the tail moves in. And then as you lower the bolster, you're going to put your left foot maybe on the bolster. Yeah, just kind of see. I'm going to get my blocks closer to me so that when I put my left foot on top, I've got some supports right away on their higher setting besides my bolster. And flex the left foot. Feel the body leaning forwards. Yeah, try to let that left leg be somewhat forward on the bolster so you really are providing that circulation through the inner thigh. Right? It kind of sculpts the leg. It's kind of a circulation sculpting. Okay, now when we come up, we stay with the leg process. We still continue that circulation through the viaduct of the leg. But when I turn left, my right hand to the left leg, just below the knee, I find there's a notch there that I can kind of comfortably hold on to. And then that kind of persuades the stretch on the side of my knee, right? It kind of massages that space. And then turn to your left so the right hand, the left hand reaches around to the right hip and then you twist. Now you could put your hand on the floor, or if you can get the block back there quickly, you can maneuver your rotation. I'm trying to encourage it to be on the waist though, so that you have the opportunity to feel around towards maybe that sandbag loop, right? If you've got one of the loops, you're going to reach your hand around to get that loop. Or maybe it doesn't make a difference to hold it or not. You still feel support. Good. So the head is turned to the left. Feel where the neck is balancing. I don't know if you think of your upper back pattern as if your neck is different than the spine, or if you kind of conceive of them as the same thing. But you might feel the bulk of what's above your shoulders as your neck, and then feel how your head turns on top of the shoulders. Your visualization might be an owl. Now, as the heart gets a little bit of that twist, get a good final squeeze of the organs here, moving the energy through them. Okay, and when you're ready to come into pigeon with the right leg, go for it. And if you want to stay with this curious squeeze of the core viscera, right? You'll turn back forward eventually. But you know, that core stage right here, when I take the ball out, the sand off, and stretch the left thigh back, it is kind of nice to have had this twist to the left, and then to let this left leg move back and continue that complete kind of skill of soaking that space in that circulation from the poses. Right? I know this practice is getting slower and slower as I mature. So as I lower down onto my bolster, this is nice for my my waist, my back muscles. You can rest onto the bolster, turning your head either direction, possibly to the right would be smart for your balance. But feeling, if you prefer to have your bolster under your elbows, right, you could turn it. Inner thigh, deep stretch. Hip. Feel that core breath. Now feeling where you might have an opportunity to notice your kind of miniature breathing muscles, right? Kind of feeling the back of the pelvis up into the kidneys, and then just up from there, the lungs, right in the back body, way up high in the back, right where 70% of them are, right? So that's something to notice. Your back breathing is important. So opportunity here is to start to come into your final pose. If you prefer to stay in pigeon right now a little longer, stay with sleeping pigeon. Maybe it's sleeping pigeon shavasana for you. Or maybe you don't shavasana in pigeon. Okay, so the options will be, you can go to legs up the wall. You're at home, so you have that luxury to take your final pose just how you like. Or you can take it into a bolster bench, right? So as I walk the hands on back, and I'm careful to not squeeze and squish too much around the kidneys. So I'm going to try to swing my back waist down and into my right thigh. And then as I come up, the left leg goes out. And we're going to stretch the right leg open too. The back of that knee needs to stretch out. And then when I put the bolster in front on top of my blocks, I just tend to put the blocks in right about the width of the bolster. Usually works. And then I add my I have to tuck it in actually. My bolster on top. Be honest. Okay. Add a blankie, so scoot off your blankets and add a blanket rolled up so your heels can float. Yeah, just like you started with a rolled blanket, huh? You're going to end with a rolled blanket. Okay, sometimes these things come full circle, huh? All right. So when you put your legs up there and you lower down your seat in front of the bolster bench, then I try to get my calves kind of centered onto that blanket so it feels like it kind of mashes the calves. And I can have my blanket under my head, or if I prefer, lengthwise under my spine. So you can do either one. Turn the blanket, do something a little different. As long as it's flat, right? It's not going to be bulked up. You might like that. It might be a little intense on your back too. So keep in mind all these perspectives of deepening are gradual and very carefully advised. So pretty generic and safe. But if it feels too much for you, then take away the blanket and put it under your head. And then add some sand across the ribs or down to the belly basin so that your lower belly breathing is your focus, the diaphragmatic breathing, right? So this lower tummy support is important for that regenerating of the core organs. And it can be kind of a space as we relax back that you notice is kind of dormant during the day, the very low belly. Try to get the breath into that space and let the shoulders relax back, open the heart. If you have glasses on, it is really a good idea to take them off because it does, the hardware on the face tends to start to tighten the muscles a little bit further. Of course, if you need them, okay. But it does change the skin tone and the tension in the face just to put that on. So with the shoulders back, relax the heart space and return the body into even a deeper state of breath. Receiving and letting go. Make sure you're warm enough if you need to toss on a blankie. Or a sock. Coax the breath in the lower belly to lift up the skin so it actually moves and pulses. It has its own life force, if you haven't noticed. And then as I feel that breath, I'm also including the ribs. And as I deflate, exhale, belly towards the spine. Inflate and deflate. Now with the heels floating, I know the body does cool quite a bit and it brings all that circulation into the vital organs, right? The blood is moved from the extremities to the core organs. So that's what goes on in the practice, the slowing down, that inner support is building. So connect to that source of inner support. And even though we're not together in the same room, right, there is a collective consciousness of us in this practice. So bring that into your experience. Maybe circle the feet before we come out, rotate the ankles, feel the movement of the toes or the nose. And then with relaxed feet, Arms reach together, interlacing the fingers overhead. Send the arms back. Now as you lower down the arms to the waist, move the sand aside. And if the blanket's along your whole spine, you'll need to roll to the side to come up. And if you have a blanket under your head, you can bring your knees to your chest, then roll up. It's a little easier that way. It's different for the back muscles though. So when I roll to the side and I come up, let's take a single moment to connect to our common focus to receive wellness, and bring the hands in front of the heart, bow into your heart center, surrendering here. And as we unite our breath to close practice, breathing in wellness into yourself and out to others. Inhale. And with exhalations, bowing into the space behind your heart. In gratitude, thank you, namaste. All right.